Now we are going to see the last part, theories of political obligation. First is the divine theory. So here the divine theory advocates that the state was created by a god and governed by his deputy. He means the the sent king is sent by the god, so he is a deputy sent by deputy to rule over them. The ruler was divinely appointed by the god and he was the agent of a god. He was responsible for his own actions to God alone. Kings were called gods because they exercised divine power on the earth. So any act of disobedience to the king would amount to the disobedience to the god. Means here we should follow to the king wholeheartedly. As the ruler was a deputy of a god, obedience to him was held to be religious duty and resistance or disobedience as a fine. Nobody could limit his will or resist his power. His word was a law, his actions were always just and benevolent. To complain against the authority of a ruler and to characterize his actions as unjust was a sin for which there was a divine punishment. He should be obeyed totally without any questioning his action or authority. Means if you don't follow the king, then divine punishment is like cutting off your tongue, hand, or giving you a capital punishment. Death punishment was given in such times. This is according to the divine theory, and the criticism is no historical evidence and illogical and unscientific. The next is about the consent theory. So the divine theory was replaced by the consent theory. It says that the authority of the state is based on consent of the people. Sanction of political obligation is the will of the people. Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau say that the people voluntarily agree to obey the laws and made consent on the basis of the obedience. Third is the prescriptive, traditional, and the conservative theory. So if the political authority is based on the principle of established customary right. People obey customs, people obey the rights because the fact of the obedience has become like a well established convention. All authority is legitimate if it is sanctioned by the custom. So traditionally people follows the king. Fourth is about the idealistic theory. To the idealist, the source of political obligation lies in the rationality of the man. According to the theory, there is no distinction between the law and the freedom. Hence, it's necessary obligation to obey the law for an individual. Freedom lies in the perfect obedience to obey the state. Land and political institutions are the external embodiments of the moral ideal. Means if you follow the law, then you have the freedom. Next is the Marxian theory. So, working class suppressed, state works for the interest of exploiting capitalist class. Oppressed and exploited masses have no obligation to the existing bourgeois political order. They must unite to overthrow such type of political system. They must revolt against the oppressive methods adopted by the capitalist government. They should not obey the laws made by the bourgeois institution in the capitalist society. The state is now an institution of a whole people. In this state, political obligation shall be converted into social obligation. And the sixth is about the social contract theory. So in that there are two types. First is this contract is described as the ground of political obligation. The contract of citizenship implies that if an individual enjoys certain privileges as a member of a polity, then he is bound to accept obligations arising from his membership. It implies that one who thinks that he does not receive any benefit from the membership of the state is free to live elsewhere. Means if you are having the membership of state, then you should accept the obligations from it, and if you don't follow that, then you should leave that membership. The second theory of contract refers to the contract of community. Since man by nature is a egoistic and a selfish man, according to this theory, so it is necessary to make an agreement with each other to set up laws for the regulation of their conduct. So as a man is selfish by nature, therefore he organized a political society in order to obtain security. On the whole, theories of social contract justify the conception that the ruling authority, if it has to be legitimate, must rest on the consent of the people. And the seventh is about the theory of general will. The idea of general will was first propounded by Rousseau in his social contract theory. He was of the view that the men ought to obey the laws of a state because they represent the general will. General will is not the will of the majority, it is the will that each man has as a moral agent. Therefore, it stands for the collective good and not for any private interest. It is always just and right. Hence, every member of the community is under obligation to obey the general will. So, here we have completed the second lesson, political obligation.